My father's voice shattered across the dinner table like broken glass. You and your kids are nothing but dead weight. Leeches sucking this family dry. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, spittle flying. He was sitting at my table, eating food I'd prepared, in the house I'd mortgaged my future to own. My daughters froze, forks suspended. My son looked like he was trying to disappear into his chair. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I set down my napkin with deliberate care and said one sentence. You have 72 hours to vacate this property. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. But what my father didn't know was that I'd been building a case against him for 2 years. Every documented lies. Every broken promise. Every threat he'd made was already archived in a folder marked evidence. And I was finally ready to use it. My name is Catherine Wells, and I've spent 41 years believing that family meant you had to absorb their dysfunction like it was a tax on your existence. My father, Robert Wells, was a successful contractor who'd built an empire on other people's labor and his own refusal to acknowledge his children's worth. My mother, Patricia, had divorced him when I was 15, finally choosing her sanity over his charades. She'd escaped. I had stayed, trapped by guilt and obligation, and the belief that if I just tried hard enough, I could earn his respect. I have 3 children. Emma, 16, Lucas, 14, and Sophia, 10. They're smart, kind, resilient in ways children shouldn't have to be. Their father, my ex-husband Derek, had abandoned us when Lucas was 3 months old. He'd decided fatherhood wasn't for him and vanished into Colorado with a woman he met at a bar. I'd raised them alone, worked my way up from assistant project manager to senior operations director at a commercial development firm, and by age 38, I'd managed to buy a house. A real house. In a good school district. With space and light and room to breathe. My father had moved in 6 months after the purchase. It was supposed to be temporary. A rough patch, he'd called it. Divorce settlements and market downturns had left him temporarily strapped. He needed a place to land while he rebuilt. I'd said yes because I was still the daughter who didn't know how to say no. Because guilt was a language I spoke fluently. Temporary became permanent. His rough patch became my financial burden. The money started small. Can you cover the utilities this month? Followed by, I need help with my truck payment. Then, your brother's got a legal situation. I need $15,000. My brother Marcus. Naturally. The golden child who'd never worked a day in his life, who'd cycled through failed business ventures and bad marriages while my father bankrolled every mistake. Meanwhile, I was the one expected to save him from the consequences. I paid. I always paid. By the time I realized what was happening, my father had settled into my home like a colonist, expecting everything to revolve around his comfort. He ate food I purchased. He used utilities I paid for. He invited his friends over and complained about the decor I'd chosen. He criticized my parenting while my children learned to tiptoe around his moods. The turning point came when he demanded I take out a home equity line of credit to fund another one of Marcus's schemes. A guaranteed investment opportunity that required $120,000. I said no. For the first time in my life, I used that word and didn't apologize. His response was to schedule that dinner. He'd called earlier in the week, voice artificially pleasant. I want to talk to you about something important. Family dinner. Saturday night. I should have known. Should have recognized the tone. But I was still naive enough to hope that maybe, finally, he'd respect my boundary. Maybe he'd accept my no and move forward. Instead, he orchestrated an ambush. That Saturday evening, I spent 3 hours preparing. Roast chicken, his favorite. Vegetables from the farmer's market. Wine he liked. I was still performing, still trying to earn something that should have been freely given. My daughters helped in the kitchen, and I caught them exchanging glances. They knew. They'd always known that their grandfather's presence in our home was a threat, not a comfort. I'd instructed them earlier to stay upstairs during dinner. This is a conversation between adults, I'd said. which was code for, "Your grandfather might say things that are cruel, and I don't want you to internalize his pain as your fault." But Lucas had defied me. At 14, he was protective in a way that broke my heart. He sat at the table anyway, a silent witness, his presence a statement. We made it through the appetizer in near silence. The moment we sat down for the main course, my father launched. "Catherine, you're making a mistake," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "This no you've decided on. It's selfish. It's short-sighted. And frankly, it's embarrassing. You're supposed to help your family. That's what you do." "I help my family," I replied carefully. "My children. The people who depend on me." "We all depend on you," he shot back. His face was already reddening. "And you're about to let your brother lose everything because of your stubbornness." "No," I said. "I'm refusing to enable Marcus's pattern of financial irresponsibility." "That's different." That's when he exploded. He stood up so fast his chair knocked backward, clattering against the hardwood. His voice came out like a roar, primal and filled with rage. "You and your kids are nothing but dead weight. Leeches. Do you know how much I've sacrificed? Do you have any idea what it costs to live here? And this is how you repay me. By refusing to help your own brother." The words hung in the air, toxic and absolute. Have you subscribed to this channel? Subscribe for daily stories. Hit the notification bell for more stories that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Emma appeared in the doorway at the top of the stairs, her face pale. Sophia was crying. I could hear her from her bedroom down the hall. And Lucas, my son, looked at his grandfather with an expression of such disgust that I realized in that moment my children had finally seen Robert Wells for what he was. A man. Not a patriarch. Not an authority figure worthy of respect. Just a man using his rage to manipulate those around him. I set down my napkin. Slowly. Deliberately. Each movement a statement. "You have 72 hours to vacate this property," I said, my voice steady as stone. His face went through a series of transformations, shock, then rage, then something that looked almost like panic. "You can't be serious," he said. "Completely serious. 3 days. After that, I'm calling law enforcement." He lunged toward me, his voice rising to a scream. "You ungrateful little." "Stop," I said, and something in my tone made him pause. "You're done. All of it. Done." Lucas stood. "Mom, you want me to call the police now?" "No," I said. "Not yet." But I was already making a mental list. Document everything. Call a lawyer. Change the locks. Protect my children from the man who just revealed exactly how little they meant to him. My father spent that night in the guest room. The next morning, I'd already called my attorney. Margaret Chen was a family law specialist who didn't suffer fools. I told her everything, the years of financial pressure, the exploitation, the emotional abuse, the incident at dinner. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. "Has he contributed to the mortgage or property taxes?" she asked. "No. He's never paid rent. He's never even offered. Then he's a guest in your home. A guest who's overstayed his welcome. I can file for an eviction notice, but there's more here. What he said last night, the threat implied by his aggression, that's documented." "Not yet," I said. "But I have witnesses. My son. My daughters." Margaret nodded slowly. "I want you to start documenting everything. Every conversation. Every interaction. This goes beyond eviction. This is about protecting yourself from potential future harassment." From that moment, I became a different kind of meticulous. I started a journal. I recorded phone calls. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. I photographed everything, his belongings in my home, the state of the guest room, the evidence of his unauthorized occupation. Each entry was dated, timed, factual. I was building a case. My father tried negotiating. "I'll leave in a month. I just need time to find a place." 72 hours. I repeated. He tried guilt. After everything I've done for you. You've done nothing for me except hurt me and my children. The time for that is over. He tried bargaining. I'll get out, but you have to drop the legal action. There is no legal action yet. By the end of the second day, he'd packed. He'd called Marcus, who'd called my mother, who'd called me. Everyone suddenly wanted to mediate, to convince me I was being dramatic. My mother was the only one who understood. Good, she'd said quietly. It's about time you did this. He left on the morning of the third day. As he was packing his truck, I stood on the porch with my arms crossed. Not angry anymore. Just resolute. If you attempt to contact my children, if you try to access this property without permission, if you make any threats, I will pursue legal action. Is that clear? He didn't answer. He just drove away, his truck kicking up gravel, leaving a cloud of dust that slowly settled over everything. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in years, my house felt like mine again. My children could laugh without fear. We could have normal dinners without tension metallic and sharp in the air. Emma stopped sleeping with her door locked. Sophia stopped having nightmares. Lucas started smiling again. But the peace didn't last. A week later, my phone started buzzing. Facebook messages from family members I hadn't spoken to in years. My father had posted a long, winding story about the ungrateful daughter who'd thrown him out, who was poisoning his grandchildren against him, who'd ruined his life. The comments were vicious. Strangers I'd never met were attacking me, calling me cold, heartless, a bad mother. My brother Marcus had jumped in with his own narrative, framing himself as the victim of my cruelty. He posted pictures from our childhood, memories strategically edited to make me look like the villain and him like the misunderstood visionary. The story had traction. Thousands of shares. Hundreds of comments. My boss called me into his office. He'd seen the posts. He wanted to know if there was personal drama that might affect my work. I sat across from him, maintaining my composure, and explained the situation factually. I evicted my father from my home after he verbally abused me and my children, I said. I have documentation. I have witnesses. If you need details, I'm happy to provide them. He nodded slowly. Okay, we support you. This is not your concern from our end. But I wanted to make sure you were aware people were talking. I thanked him and left. But the violation lingered. They'd invaded my professional space. My children had started getting comments at school. A teacher had asked Emma if everything was okay at home. That night, I called Margaret again. They're defaming me, I said. Publicly. On social media. Is there something I can do? Screenshot everything, Margaret said. Document every post, every comment. Dates, times, content. This is becoming harassment. If it escalates, we have grounds for a cease and desist letter. I spent the next week archiving every post, every comment, every message my father sent to people he knew, trying to turn them against me. The archive grew into something substantial, a digital paper trail of his campaign to destroy my reputation. Then he made a mistake. He sent me a direct message. A threat, really, though phrased carefully. If you don't reconsider, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of daughter you are. I'll ensure your children understand their mother's true nature. It was dated. It was signed. It was evidence. I forwarded it to Margaret with a subject line. This is exactly what you said to look for. She called me within an hour. I'm sending a cease and desist letter tomorrow. If he violates this, we file for harassment charges. This crosses the line from family drama to legal matter. The letter arrived at his new apartment in a commercial building downtown. I imagined him opening it, reading Margaret's precise language, understanding finally that I was done playing by family rules. He stopped posting. The messages ceased. The campaign of public humiliation ground to a halt. But the damage was already done. I'd lost relationships with extended family who'd chosen to believe his version. My professional reputation had taken a hit, though my boss had stood by me. My children had learned a harsh lesson about how adults betray each other. What they'd also learned was that their mother didn't back down when it mattered. 3 months after my father left, I was invited to speak at a community center about family boundaries and financial exploitation. Apparently, my story had resonated with people far beyond my immediate circle. Someone had shared my experience on a support forum, and it had helped others in similar situations. I said yes. The night of the event, I stood in front of 60 people and told the truth. Not the version my father was still selling. Not the narrative my brother was still crafting. The actual story. About a daughter who'd learned that love without respect isn't love at all. About a mother who'd had to choose her children's well-being over her father's comfort. About the moment she'd finally said no and meant it. The questions afterward broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. Women sharing their own stories. Daughters trapped in similar situations. Mothers trying to protect their children from family members who weaponized love. I realized that night that my experience wasn't unique. It was a story repeated in countless homes, whispered in countless bedrooms, carried in countless hearts. After the event, a woman named Patricia, coincidentally, my mother's name, approached me. She was in her 60s, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm still in my house, watching my father live here rent-free while my daughters are struggling. I didn't think I had a choice." "You do," I told her. "It's hard. But you do." I gave her Margaret's information. I gave her my email. I told her she wasn't alone. Over the following months, I became something I'd never expected, an advocate. I started a blog documenting my experience. I collected stories from others. I created resources about tenant rights, financial boundaries, and what to do when family members exploit your hospitality. My father never apologized. My brother never took responsibility. But they also never contacted me again. The silence between us became a kind of peace, not the peace of resolution, but the peace of separation. Emma graduated high school with honors and applied to universities. She was applying to law school, I suspect, because of what she'd witnessed. Lucas joined the debate team and spent his time constructing logical arguments about family dynamics. Sophia, my youngest, drew pictures of houses with doors that locked, rooms that belonged only to her. One evening, sitting on the porch with Margaret, who'd become a friend, not just a lawyer, I reflected on the year that had passed. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Evicting him? All of this?" "Not for a second," I said. "The only regret I have is not doing it sooner." "Your children wouldn't have suffered as much," Margaret said quietly. No, I agreed. But they would have learned a different lesson. They would have learned that bullying works if you're family. That exploitation is acceptable if you frame it as love. That protecting yourself is selfish. I paused. Instead, they learned that respect matters. That boundaries are love. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away. The house around us was quiet. The girls were asleep. Lucas was at a debate tournament. The space felt sacred in its ordinariness, just a mother and a friend on a porch. No chaos, no demands, no rage echoing through dinner. My father had called our home a burden. He'd called my children dead weight. What he'd actually done was release us from the illusion that we owed him anything. I'd spent years trying to earn his respect. It took his cruelty and my children's pain to make me understand. Respect isn't earned from people incapable of giving it. It's protected by people who know their own worth. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, if someone you love is exploiting your kindness, if your home has become a battleground, if you're teaching your children that family is code for obligation, know this, you have more power than you think. Documentation matters. Boundaries matter. Your peace matters more than preserving relationships that were never actually relationships at all. It took me 41 years to learn that lesson. I'm hoping my story teaches it faster to someone else. My father is still in the area. I see his truck occasionally on the highway. He's living in an apartment, working sporadically, exactly the life he'd always feared. My brother is still recycling business ideas, still looking for the next angle. They're not happy, but that's not my responsibility anymore. My responsibility is to my 3 children, to creating a home where they feel safe, to showing them that love has integrity, to teaching them that the bravest thing you can do is say no and mean it. The dead weight my father spoke of. We've never felt lighter. If you've ever had to evict family from your space, your life, your heart, tell me in the comments. Share your story. Because when we speak, we remind each other that we're not alone. And if this sit well with you, give it thumbs up. Subscribe and click the notification bell for more. There are more stories coming, stories of people who finally drew the line and didn't step back. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away.